It's all about going out live on time. It's crazy when you realize you've created a show, but then it's for record only rather than the live broadcast, and you just got to start all over again. That's just how it is. Oh, it's Monday. I get it now. Okay, Delta's gone. Last rains moved very quickly off to the northeast, brushed Pennsylvania. Sorry, the rains got there just a little bit early, but it's been a really dry couple of months, so those rains are largely welcome in most locations. And then they've moved out to sea. Now, I'm a little farther west. We had a very potent, kind of dry, at least where I was, a cold front roll through here on Sunday. It is now marching off to the east and then continuing to head out to sea. So the Delta's gone, and then this very cool fall air is going to ensure that all vestiges of that tropical storm, of that humidity, are gone. Yeah, Karen, I hear you on that. And I had this great description all written up too, hashtags and all, and I'm like, we'll just do that afterwards. In any case, let's roll on through here. Now I've got to reshare the screen. I had that done all once, and boom. All right, we'll start with Twitter as I kind of tend to do, just because it works for the intended goal at the moment. And at the top of the screen, and we'll start with this. Completely atopical, but we'll just start and end with this. So Scott Adams says, no matter who wins 2020, Trump will be the last human leader of the United States. No future leader will be strong enough to overrule whatever AI pushes us. Ooh, that's really kind of an interesting thought. A contest that in the next 4 years, considering how social media has been able to sculpt our discussions and create these echo chambers, what will it be like in 4 years' time? All right, we're going to talk a little bit more about that in another perspective coming up at 6 o'clock or in just under an hour. And going to title that show, Is It Real or Is It Fake? That's not what my original topic was, but that's just kind of how it came out over the course of the day. All right, Scott from Scotland. The Arctic is heading into uncharted territory once again. The sea ice refreeze this season is struggling to get started thanks to anomalous heat now stored into the open waters. And because we've had so much ice melt off at the top of the ice shelf, again, it can absorb heat, and it's much easier to re-ice water that is at 33, 34 degrees than, say, 36, 37 degrees. It takes a little more time. There was another paper that Ben Davidson shared from Suspicious Observer about that ultimately, for global warming, this cycle to come to an end, that this entire ice sheet has to break up. And when that happens, there'll be this massive drainage of fresh water that will come out of both sides of Greenland, but largely down here through Iceland. And this cold flush of fresh, not salt water, but fresh, warmish water will then shut down the Gulf Stream. And once that happens, that begins the next couple of centuries of very cool weather, because we can have these little solar minimums coming and going, but the ice sheet has remained. Now, at the end of this much longer 12,000 year or so cycle, when we begin to completely break up one of the poles with the ice, then that signals a much, much larger event would be underway. And we're all signs are that we're approaching that very quickly. So we look at the linear graph chart. 2012 seemed to be the bottom of that, where we bottomed way out about 12, 13, 14 September. Right about the time the hurricane season peaks is when we also see the greatest extent of that ice sheet melt back, and now we're beginning to build back. But because the jet stream has been in such a funky situation with massive warm ridges way up to the north and the cool air suppressed farther south, the rebuilding of the ice sheet has been somewhat slower this winter, or this coming fall. All right, we've got more northern lights. They continue to dance in Norway and those latitudes up to the north, eastern Canada, maybe even the Canadian prairies, seeing some of those. And now that we've got the moon out of the way, as we're coming up very quickly on new moon, these should be incredibly visible for those folks which are a little bit farther north. All right, CO2-induced starvation update from Reuters. That was sarcasm. Okay, a little sarcasm. A global glut of soybeans and grains, which has depressed farm and farm income. So there we are. Even the Canadians managing a pretty good harvest. Soybean pods, if you get 4 beans in a pod, you're scoring. Last year, the cold came so early in Canada that they left a lot of those beans in the field. And this year, so far, we're able to get a bunch of those out. And of course, fall colors, doing their thing. It is October, and in New England, the colors are at their peak as they work very quickly down into those more southern cities right now. And just for those folks that happen to be in and around Pennsylvania, they call this, what was it, a poopy day? Just because the clouds and the rain and all that stuff left over from, why won't you play there, mister? But, okay, maybe because it's slow, and that's just a nice little skyline shot as we look at Philadelphia today. Icky poo nasty weather. That's it. That's the official word, is icky poo nasty. I remember those days. All right, the Weather Prediction Center, the WPC, a temperature roller coaster this week. There'll be a warm-up to start with potential record heat in the Southwest and Plain States. We're kind of in that now, especially in California. We got a couple of days between now and about Thursday where we're going to see some very warm conditions, and those will 4 times spread eastbound. And then Colorado, some snow and some of the higher terrain. That happened over the weekend. Not really enough to put out the fires that are in place, but enough to slow them down, enough to add some humidity in the air and to re-wet the fuels as they're so accurately called, and even get some wet on the bark and some of that down timber. Then that can at least slow things down. Crazy to think that much of South Florida is on pace to set its rainiest year on record. Yet this trend would suggest Florida drought is likely coming come winter 2021 as we flip from El Nino or from La Nina to an El Nino. Ozone hole over the Antarctic, the biggest, deepest in years, and this with almost a total ban on CFCs. We talked about this the other day, and there may send some of the scientists and researchers and so forth and so on, the atmospheric chemists, to reanalyze why we have these holes in the ozone layer, that there's something else that's triggering them to get to this size. If it's this big without an input from these chlorofluorocarbons, then that means there's some other mechanism at work, and we've got to figure that out. Significant pattern change with a sharp cold front forecast to spread across Canada and the States through mid-October. That's the cool weather. Whereas out west, this strong ridge just remains in place. And folks, your masks. Well, at least we banned straws. But now we have all of this other pollution. We've got to be dealing with that. All right, cheers on a Monday, Mike. CPC long range. There's the link for you guys to look at. I've got that actually in the show stack, so we'll get to that in a moment. Interesting, yeah, warmish. Anything above freezing is warm, Karen. When you get that far north, and a poopy day, icky poopy day in PA. You got to have them now and again. It just keeps. We know how icky poo is good to keep grass and trees green. It works on a bunch of levels, doesn't it? All right, Interagency Fire Center out of Boise, Idaho, and a national preparedness level, it remains at 4. They dropped it from 5 to 4 back on the 1st of October, not quite 2 weeks ago. Currently, 74 large fires have burned 4.2 million acres in 12 states. To date, 45,500 acres have burned a little over 8 million acres. But more interestingly, in my eyes, is today marks the latest in the year that the Interagency Fire Center is at National Preparedness Level 4. So we've it all comes back to the continuation of this drought, and this is how the drought has worsened across the West. Even if we got some winter rains, we just did not have it. We had an abysmal summer monsoon this year. It came and then it went and then it tried to come back. I remember it was either 2013 and the 2015. We just had copious amounts of summer rain and really made up for terrible winter rains. But this year we had last year we had a rough or not so extensive summer monsoon, and then the winter rains were early, and then they ended by the end of January. And so we're really setting ourselves up for no wonder it's burning out there situation. So as we look ahead, running out the GFS, the Global Forecast System, the models, Even along the Oregon coast now, whereas last week we had a snow event in the Central Rockies, that is completely evaporated from the forecast. It's just gone. And now it's even pulling back the rains from Northern California to just a little bit from Ashland, Medford. Even on the coastal ranges, less than an inch. And the Olympics, 2 inches, maybe a little bit more in some of the peaks. And with the stream flows as weak as they are, this hurts. This hurts, and that'll be compounded with some heat a little bit later in the week. These were record forecast highs today. Tomorrow, Wednesday, looks like there's the bulk of them, the most northern one being Alamosa, Colorado, and then into the high plains of Texas, where they had an okay summer monsoon. But if you keep on with these temperatures in the 90s, middle and upper 90s, deep into October, we tend to lose what water we've gathered up in those soils through that summer wet season. If they're gone, we're waiting for then a December event to wind up, come out of the southern Rockies, tap that Gulf moisture, and then reaccumulate that moisture. But the farmers and ranchers have got to have that moisture in those grazing areas just to sustain the livestock. Otherwise, you're calling up your hay farmer and saying, "Hey, how much a ton?" "I need 30 tons. And it gets to be expensive. And this is where farmers end up culling their herds because they cannot afford to feed them. All right, extremes yesterday across the country. 106 in Rio Grande Village, Texas. 18 at Gunnison County, Colorado. And the Atlantic a little bit quieter than it has been in quite some time. One area just 700 miles east of the Windward Islands, and the formation opportunities are forecast as low through 48 hours and also low through about 5 days. Good to see some of you on there. Robbie, Billy, been a while. Billy was one of the first guys that I met in Topeka when I was early on the air, and Billy said, "Scott, you won't believe what they're doing to the weather." And I said, "Billy, you're crazy. You're crazy, Billy, the things you're talking about." Who was crazy? And this is something we'll talk about in an hour, is how we can have so much information come up in front of us and we can't see it. We can't see it because we don't have a context in which to fit it. And this is how I could be in weather and in meteorology for so many years and not see what was happening. And even if somebody points it out, it's got to be that fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth person to point something out to you before you'll say, "Oh, I think I've heard that somewhere before." And as that person keeps hitting you with that topic, then little by little, there's a place in the consciousness, a place in your awareness where that can be opened up to fit this new information. As this new information works its way in there, it's much like erosion. Ice in a boulder, it begins to crack it open. It's a process. It's a process. And you got to be patient with those people that you like to red pill, because it's fun to red pill, but so often you turn around, the conversation's over, and they've spit out the red pill. It's sitting over there on the dirt. And you're like, "Oh, okay, maybe next time." All right, across the country, red or orange and yellow is the dry atmosphere, and obviously the clouds are, well, what look like clouds. And this is just basically the moisture plume that eventually leads to the formation of clouds. But this latest cool front now marching quickly across the Great Lakes states, and then what is left of Delta now moving into the cooler waters of the Atlantic. We'll kind of zoom on into the west, and this last two storms just didn't get far enough south to really aid the firefighters. Although in Northern California there has been some suppression, they did get some showers earlier in the weekend. But if we're going to bring in record heat again, we're going to continue with those easterly, those offshore, those dry winds, then the fuels just dry up once again, and the fires go, "Hey, we're back." Even into northern, let me zoom on in here. You can see some of the snow on the mountains of northern Colorado, and these were pretty hefty plumes of fire, but there's the snow. So at least we gave those firefighters a bit of a break so they can either A, catch up, sleep in, get a little more than a few hours of sleep. And then this is what I thought was kind of cool. These gravity waves, just, artificial, natural, they're there. They're there. I have my opinion on them. I really, really do. That it's a function of these waves would then shape and sculpt the movement of weather. And this is why the trails are so vitally important for those weather makers, because it helps them see and shape where these where these waves go and where they interact constructively, we can develop rain and thunder showers. We can pulse these waves through an established line of thunderstorms and tear them to pieces. And then all you're left with is our Mamatus and then Virga weeping out of what would have been a very, very profitable or productive rainstorm. So these waves I tend to take notice of. Look up here and here. They just tend to be standing stand still, right through there, right along the Mississippi. Those waves aren't going anywhere. And I can promise you they are not a function of the terrain down below. There is some kind of resonance pattern that has dropped into the atmosphere and that most weather people are absolutely and utterly clueless about. It is one part of meteorology that they just cannot see. All right, morning lows. I believe this is probably Gunnison. At 18 degrees, that would have been one of those, the nation's coolest spot, but a lot of frost, even as you get into northern New Hampshire. We'll refresh this and bring us to the current imagery. Still cool in New England, in the mid-Atlantic states, 80s in Florida. No wonder people head down there, but then cool in the Rockies as well, even at this hour. And there's the humidity. It's in place. Some of it's getting up here. We've got some good south winds. So that'll likely fuel the showers and thunderstorms that are now have ignited and marching very quickly because they're driven by 15, 20, 25 mile an hour winds back through the western part of the Lake States, the Great Lakes States and the upper Mississippi. So you can see them moving on quickly. I think I probably have, yes, here we are, through Kalamazoo, up into Saginaw, and across the lake. So as late as it is, boaters are headed on in there, given it was a holiday today. They could be out and enjoying this weather. All right, 18Z, the GFS is the latest model. Here we are. And this flat ridge in place, but with a strong 594 ridge sitting off the California coast. And it was this ridge that looked like it was going to be more amplified. Flat flow, somewhat amplified, and then very amplified. We just are able to draw a very tall ridge in place. And if we get a tall ridge like happens right in through here, earlier we had seen that there would be some kind of a storm that pop over the ridge and then curl down through the Rockies. And if that were to happen, we would be able to realize a snowstorm. Here's just a little kink right here. It's enough to just bring the cool air through the mountain valleys, but really not enough to bring some moisture, to draw it up from Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, to draw it into it, to provide us, the Rockies, with a good snowstorm. It just doesn't happen. So we're fairly dry through at least the 24th, 25th, 26th of October. And then if we're looking way farther out in the models, these things just tend not to happen. All right, one more. Blue is snow. So some of these more northerly spots right through there. The blue is the snow. Let's see what you guys are saying over here. Yepper Scott, weather whacked out here in Kansas last night too. 75 mile an hour winds in central Kansas. Thankfully, no fire started in that 6 hour period. That's a good thing. Yeah, we had lots of rain in 14 here in the San Luis Valley, trying to open the parlor, and it just kept raining. Yes, so what do? You've got to work around that. And if I we were working on that at 14. 12 was such a dry year in the San Luis Valley, and then 13 was a great monsoon as well. What a difference in just a short amount of time. What is that, Mark Twain? Wait 5 minutes, and then it just happens. Culling herds because you can't feed them has a long-term impact on economy and food supply chains. It really does, because you're taking offline production capacity for the future. You're taking, profits if it all works out, but you've got to preserve the ability to have a future. That's really kind of the thing. All right, I got to wind this down. I got to be back in about 40 minutes with the show. So the headline is going to be probably lake effect snows. All of the snow. We're to the next Sunday, Monday, right in through here. Lots of cold north winds. The Great Lakes states. You live there because you love it, right? You like Chicago because of the weather, right? It's the Windy City, right? So it's going to live up to every little bit of its name. Let's just leave it right there and then call it good. No, here's the CPC, because I promised you that. Billy, and there's the 6 to 10 day outlook. No, that was Mike. With above normal temperatures along the southwest and then the east coast, and then the mid part of the nation looks like it's going to be cool at least, and I'm going to say through the end of the month, because once the pattern begins, the pattern tends to stay in place. All right, we'll come back with another perspective at 6 o'clock Mountain. We'll talk about memory hole. We'll talk about stories that kind of hit the news, or even so many stories that were news 20, 30, 40 years ago. And it's like they're just gone. It's about how do you maintain a narrative. And this has been such a story for a long time. It really has been. But then how do you discern, what is truthful? And that's, for me, probably the biggest thing that people are trying to control is what information I could look at to then decide what is truthful and what is not. They don't trust us with our own thought processes. That's probably the big thing, is they don't trust us with our own thought processes. All right, going to be back here in a bit. Until then, hey, keep looking up. It's a beautiful day out there.